This is the expression that we started with, and all of that simply equals 5x plus 3 divided by 2x squared. So we start with the square root of 50x to the 4th power plus the square root of 18x squared divided by the square root of 8x to the 6th power. Let me first start by working on this term, the square root of 50x to the 4th power. What I'm going to do is rewrite the 50 as 2 times 25. Square x squared, that also equals x to the 4th power. So now I just factor the 50 and I separated the x to the 4th power into x squared squared. The second thing that I do is that I rewrite the 25 as 5 squared. 5 squared is just 5 times 5, which is 25. Now I have the square root of 2 multiplied by 5 squared multiplied by x squared, all of that also squared. Now remember that if I have a square root is nothing more than a root of grade 2. The grade of the square root is 2. So anything that I have on the radicand on the inside of the radical sign with an exponent 2, which is equal to the grade of the root, so 2, I can take outside of the radical sign. For example, the number 5 has an exponent 2. And the square root, as I said before, is of grade 2. So I can take this 5 outside of the radical sign. As you can see, it is now outside, below here. Also, all of this expression in parentheses, x squared, has an exponent 2. This exponent applies to all of this in here. So what I can take outside of the radical sign is x squared, because x squared is also squared. So x squared, because it has an exponent 2, comes outside of the radical sign, and that is why you see down here that I have 5x squared outside of the radical sign. 5 squared came out just as a 5, and x squared squared came out just as x squared, only with one exponent, the one on the inside, and the other one, well, it got lost because we took it outside of the radical sign. Now, this expression just equals 5x squared multiplied by the square root of 2. Now I'm going to work on the square root of 18x squared. 18, I'm going to factor it as 2 multiplied by 9. So 2 multiplied by 9 is the same thing as 18. Now that number 9, the 2 multiplied by 9, I can rewrite it as 3 squared. 2 multiplied by 9 is 18. 2 multiplied by 3 squared also equals 18. Now, as you can see, I have the number 3 with an exponent 2 and the variable x with an exponent 2. So I can take that number 3 and that x outside of the radical sign. And that is what I do here. The 3, because it was square, came outside of the radical sign, and the x, because it was also square, it came out of the radical sign without any exponent. Now, let's work on the denominator. The denominator is the square root of 8x to the 6th power. I do the same thing. I rewrite the 8 as 2 times 4, and the x to the 6th power, I also can rewrite that as x cubed parentheses squared. So, the next step, I also take the number 4 and I write it as 2 squared. So now, I have an exponent 2 that applies to the number 2, and I have an exponent 2 that applies to the x cubed. And all of that inside of a square root, which is of grade 2. So I can take outside of the square root the number 2 and the x cube. And that is what I do in this step. The 2 is on the outside now, and the x cube is on the outside of the radical sign also now. All of that denominator becomes 2x cubed multiplied by the square root of 2. So now I can factor the numerator. I have a common factor on both terms, which is the square root of 2. So I factor the square root of 2, and it becomes square root of 2 multiplied by parentheses 5x squared from the first term plus 3x from the second term. And in the denominator, I have 2x cubed multiplied also by the square root of 2. So now I have these two square roots of 2, one in the numerator and one in the denominator. And as you may know, when you have the same number or variable in the numerator and in the denominator, that just equals 1. So these two, the square root of 2 with this other square root of 2 simply become 1. And anything multiplied by 1 is just same thing. I don't have to write multiply by 1. So it just seems like they disappear, but they did not disappear. They just became a 1, a multiplication by the number 1. So in the end, what I have is from the numerator 5x squared plus 3x, and from the denominator 2x cubed. And I can also factor from the numerator and the denominator a variable x. If I take one x outside from this term and another x out from this term, what I get is x multiplied by parentheses 5x plus 3. If I multiply this x times 5x, I get 5x squared. And if I multiply this x with the 3, I get 3x. So I factor 1x on the numerator, and also I can factor 1x on the denominator. It becomes x multiplied by 2x squared. These two terms multiplied become 2x cubed. So now, exactly as it happened before, I have the same number or variable, in this case the letter x, the variable x in the numerator and the denominator, and those two simply become 1, and I don't have to write them. And at the end, what I'm left with is 5x plus 3 divided by 2x squared. And so in the end, this is the expression that we started with, and all of that simply equals 5x plus 3 divided by 2x squared.